Thank you, Paige, for singing that song. She probably wasn't even born when that song was popular. She's like, who is it? I'm like, Sade. But thank you for singing that song. I love that song because, there must be an angel by my side that led me to you. I think of that as our spirit, and that is true in every relationship in our life. Every person who comes into our life, they're there for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And they're there to help us wake up. You can also think about it by talking about giving it to yourself, right? Like this kiss of life, this passion for life, this energy for life that is infused in us through our spirit. And I just want to embrace this idea as we begin our time together today, just this idea that this energy, this spark of life is the way that spirit loves us through the things that happen in our life. So what do we bring to all our relationships? I have this visual. You're embarking on a relationship, whether it's your partner or it's, a friendship or even with your kids, and you're bringing all your baggage with you, right? You got your baggage. What's in your baggage? Your history's in your baggage, whatever your story is about that. Maybe you got an energetic impression in your body of everything that happened to you, right? You bring your awareness. We bring our spiritual practice here at Cityside. And we also bring our ability to choose how we show up in life, right? We bring all these things into all our relationships. And so I just want to share a story of something that happened to me recently. I was away at this conference, my work life outside of Cityside. I'm with an organization called Vistage, and we have this conference every year for the people who do the work. It's called Chair World. It's kind of a dumb name. Rich and I laugh about it all the time. So I'm at Chair World, and I'm chatting with one of my friends, and he says to me, how are you doing? And people love to say, like, scale of 1 to 10, how are you doing, right? I'm like, yeah, I'm about a 6 or a 7 right now. And he said to me, well, like, that's not okay. Like, what's going on? Like a 6? Really, Aimee, you're a 6? And I said, well, I've just been feeling a little depleted. I've been feeling a little bit sad. I've been feeling a little adrift, and I've been feeling like my energy is kind of waning. So this just invoked in me, of course, because then I go and take it to prayer. John was my prayer partner the next day. He can attest. I was a little bit of a mess. And I just sat with myself, and I'm like, what is up for me right now? Like, what's up for me? And I realized that, I had some things in my life that I wanted to look at. And there was one of them in particular that I really didn't want to take a look at that had to do with my family. And so, I did some work with my practitioner, and I had a chat with my sister to give me some context, and just to be, I'm not going to tell you guys the whole story, but I remember when I got divorced, the counselor said to me, is there alcoholism in your family? And at that time I said, I don't think so. I don't know, and, but now we know my brother was an alcoholic, and, but there was just something about my parents that didn't make any sense to me. I'm like, what was it like in the home? I'm like, I couldn't put like my finger on it. And my sister said, Aim, Dad came from an abusive home, and there was a lot of mental illness, and that can be a lot the same. Apparently, I didn't know that, but I'm just sharing that because it's like I was so afraid to look at this, but it was deeply impacting me, right? And so just want to invite you to look at, what don't you want to look at in your life? We all have those things we don't want to look at, right? And those are the things that can just cause us to be unhappy, right? In our life and our relationships, because there's something we're really not looking at. We're not, for me, I wasn't being courageous enough to sort of look at it and then to sort of speak my truth and explore it a little bit more. So I'm going to relate that to love because I'm going to pull this into our story. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about the difference between real and conditional love. We're going to talk about understanding how we've been programmed to react in life, which is why I shared my story. Like, I've been programmed to not speak my truth and to avoid conflict at all costs. That's my family, right? And some people have the opposite family. right? They have the family that's like, let's get in the ring, we're gonna argue, we're gonna fight about that. That was not my family. But then we're gonna look at some ways we can use our spiritual practice to help us move through the places that we wanna shift, right? In service to being happier. So as John read to us in the very long reading I gave him, real love is a caring about the happiness of another person without thought for what we might get for ourselves. And when we give real love, we're not disappointed, we're not hurt, we're not angry, even when people are thoughtless or inconsiderate or don't give us anything in return. Because our concern is for their happiness, not ours. And real love is unconditional. But we're human beings who are spiritual beings having a human experience, right? We like to say that, right? And so it's not as easy as it sounds, is it? Like, it's not easy, right? Like our human self is like, what? You know, they're doing this, right? But when we're in real love, then we care how the other person feels. So it's caring for that other person without thinking about ourselves. And our concern is for them, not for us. And when we experience this unconditional love, what happens? We feel connected to the person, right? There's like, Greg Bear talks about a thread that is connected to the person that we're experiencing unconditional love with. And we feel that we're included in their life and we're not alone anymore. And you think about the world right now, so many people seem to feel alone, right? But we're not alone when we're in that connection. And in conditional love, it's more like, I like how you make me feel. I'll look at Rich when I say that. Rich is sitting in the first row here. But it's not real love if we feel disappointment and anger, right? And that sounds hard, doesn't it? You know, because we do get disappointed and angry, because certainly the other people, you know, they're not always right. Sometimes they're just wrong, right? I mean, let's be real. But it doesn't mean that we don't say anything. It doesn't mean we become like passive little beings when something is bothering us. But if we do speak to it, we do it in a way that is not harsh, right? That's loving, and that we take responsibility for ourselves. Like, this is how I'm feeling right now. It's not your fault, but this is me, you know? And disappointment and anger are two really big signs that we're in conditional love. So let's talk a little bit more about conditional love. Like, we're born into this framework of conditional love. Like, who grew up where you were trying to be a good girl, good boy, right? You know, you got to get good grades, you got to do your chores when you're supposed to do them, right? And what happens when you didn't, right? You know, some families, there might have been yelling, there might have been punishment, there might have been whatever, but like, that's the framework we grew up in for love, right? And so what are we doing when we're doing these things? Like, I'm being a good girl, quote unquote. Well, I'm trying to get approval, right? So approval and love become really connected for us. But when we give and receive conditional love, we can really start to feel empty, we can start to feel unhappy, and we can feel frustrated. So again, we're looking for, like, where am I angry? Where am I frustrated? It's a place to realize, like, I'm experiencing conditional love right now. I'm angry and frustrated. Does this feel confusing to anyone? Because it's hard to balance it, right? Like, in human reality, just to be real, it's hard to balance it, right? Because you don't want to allow yourself to be in something that's so out of whack, right? And we can become so defensive, right? Like, oh my God, this is out of whack, right? But we need to do a reframe when it's happening. I remember I've had the same practitioner for a long time, Angela. She's my gal. I love her. And I remember I had, before I met Rich, I had many years of dating unavailable people. And I remember her saying to me, like, where is that in you? Right? Like, where are you unavailable to yourself? Right? So when we're experiencing something, we need to take it into our own work. Right? And that's really, I think, the way that we move through the part of this that's confusing. It's like, okay, what is in me? Like I was feeling this sadness, whatever. It's like, okay, well, what in me needs to shift here? I need to find some courage, right, to be able to move into a more productive place instead of living in that place of sadness. So when we're unhappy, in any relationship of any kind, it doesn't matter if it's your partner or your kids or your boss or whatever, don't look at the other person. You need to start with being unconditionally loving with yourself. And that's really hard for people because I think the person that people are usually the harshest on is themselves. Like something happens in our life and we're like, why is this happening to me again? Right? You know, and it's easy to blame our parents. Like I think about my parents, I have so much empathy for my parents because they didn't know how to work through their problems, right? Did it impact me? Yeah, it did. But I don't blame them anymore. It's like that was what they learned, right? And I actually feel a little sad for them because I think they really loved each other, but they just let themselves get disconnected. And so we don't want to dwell on the past either. We don't want to live in this place where, we're a victim of our past experience and it's never going to change. Like today is a new day. You can choose something different, right? It doesn't mean that we don't, that's why I said when I started, like, we kind of carry energetically with us the things that happened to us in the past, and things like poke the wound, right? Like, you're not really mad about what's happening now. You're mad about what happened in the past. And what we need to do to be in a healthy, self-loving place is to fix our foundation first, right? Fix the foundation within ourselves that we're coming from. And so we need to explore a couple things kind of in how we're interacting with the world. Greg Bear says the signs of imitation love, that's what he calls it, are praise, power, pleasure, and safety, which we use these things for substitutes. Let me break this down. So the first one, praise, that can be flattery, it can be gratitude, it can be the need for approval, it can be money, it can be sex, it can be all these things outside of us that affirm us. And we can confuse that for real affection, right? And we're trying to earn something, right? When we're trying to get praise. And like approval for me, I got to tell you, praise and approval, it's my Achilles heel. I get trapped, right? I get trapped. Like, I don't want to be, I know better. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's my little approval thing happening again, right? So that's my personal Achilles heel. The next one is power, which we get from manipulating other people. And it's easier to understand that when you're like thinking about your boss. I'm looking at Nora over here if you're wondering why I'm looking off screen. Like it's easier to think about power when we think about our boss. Like our boss has authority over us, but there's a lot of things that we use to have authority, right? And in relationships, like as women, we can be manipulative with how we look or being all sexy or whatever. Flattery, really pushing, trying to persuade somebody, trying to control people, trying to influence them. And when we do that, we're kind of creating a false connection, right? And so just think about, does that feel like what I do? Is that something I do? Am I using, manipulation and authority to try to get people to do what I want them to do? The pursuit of pleasure is the next one. Like we distract ourselves. And think about our world today. Aren't we really good at distracting ourselves? Our phones. So guilty of that, right, Rich? Social media, the television, substances. There's lots of ways we can distract ourselves. But really, it points to like, something's missing here. I need to take a look at this, right? If I'm just distracting myself, what's that about? Right? What is that about? And the last one is safety. Avoiding anything that's going to be painful for us. Sometimes it comes up with people like, I'm just afraid of change, right? Because I feel safer if it doesn't change. Sometimes it's like, for me, when I think about safety, I think about like avoiding disapproval. And God forbid anyone should yell at me because I am going to run the other way, right? And that is safety, right? So just ask yourself, what's your default? Which of these is your default? And you know, the gift to realize it is just simply awareness. Like if you notice that it's happening, you can just say like, oh, okay, here goes my praise thing again. It's happening. Like, how do I need to shift it within myself? Or here's my, here's my distracting behavior. I need to look at myself, right? Just look at it like, what do I need to give myself right now? What does my spirit need? Your spirit is always speaking to you. It's just a question of whether you're tuning it out or whether you're slowing down enough to listen. And then there's a couple kind of behaviors that all of us do which are not very helpful. And he calls these getting and protecting. So again, as you look at these in yourself, don't blame yourself. Blaming yourself is completely unhelpful. Please don't do that. And I just want to say, as I look at these, I've done all of these, right? I've done all of these. And so you have a clean slate. If you've done all of them, you're fine. So the first one, at first when I read this word, I'm like, I don't know if I like that word. The first one is lying. And I'm like, I don't think I lie. But it's also about lying to ourselves, right? It's about, and trying to hide our mistakes and flaws and just not being who we really are because we think we're not going to be accepted for who we really are. And it might be modifying our behavior to please another human being, right? And we could dig a lot deeper into it, but I think a good question for reflection is, where in my life am I not being completely authentic, right? Pull out your Brene Brown, take a look at it, right? The second one is attacking, which the most common kind of attacking behavior is anger, right? If you're not giving me what I want, then I'm going to wear you down by yelling at you, or I'm going to berate you, or I'm going to do something else. So the second kind of getting behavior is attacking. Then there is, the third one is acting like a victim. So how do we know when we're acting like a victim? Like, look what you did to me. Look at the thing you didn't do for me that you should have done for me. Hey, not my fault, this happened to me, right? So where in your life are you acting like a victim? Or where do you feel victimized, I think is another good question. In this community, like we're like kingdom one of consciousness is, I'm the victim. And God forbid any of us should ever be there, right? But in truth, sometimes we feel like we're being victimized by something in our life, right? So we just have to catch it, right? Okay, how do I shift this? And the last one is running. We run away from something. I've decided to call this quiet quitting, and I have a confession to make. I've done a lot of quiet quitting in my life because I was afraid to have a conversation. I definitely have quiet quit relationships. There's no question about that. We do it when we withdraw, when we avoid people. And there's other ways to run, like, having a few too many glasses of wine at the end of the night. There's lots of ways we run. But it's just really to be aware, like, am I running, right? Like, what conversation could I step into instead of running? What authentic way of being could I step into instead of running? Just noticing it in yourself. And then the last one is clinging. And that looks like, excessive flattery, gratefulness, telling people we love them, giving them gifts, just like really hanging on to something. And why are we doing that? We want to get affection in return, right? That's why we cling, right? And I know I've done that too. So I'm saying, I'm just making my confession here. So whatever you've done, it's fine. But just bring it into awareness. Where in my life am I clinging? And then we take it into our spiritual practice. Right, we take this into our spiritual practice, put it into prayer, get some prayer. Sometimes the only place you are is being able to say a prayer of help me. When I was feeling sad not that long ago, I was like, okay, God, just help me out here because, like, I got nothing. I don't even know what's going on with me right now. I'm just feeling sad, right? And saying a prayer that is just like, help me, Spirit, help me see where I need to shift, help me become aware of what's going on, help me. That's a perfectly great prayer. You don't have to affirmatively pray everything. Sometimes just, asking for a little help. And give yourself some space, meditation, sitting with it. I was thinking about this. It's like sometimes we just want to slap our spiritual bypass Band-Aid on something, don't we? Like, no, I'm good. It's all good. God is good. But sometimes we just need to sit with what's actually happening in our life and just until we get a sense of it. And I really do think if we sit with whatever's going on, Spirit's going to step in and help you if you get quiet enough. That's been my experience in life. And of course, we can work with a practitioner, we can work with a therapist or some kind of a counselor. You have to check within yourself, like what is supportive of you if you're having a bad moment or a bad period in life. And give yourself some grace, right? Give yourself some grace. There's a lot of hard things that happen in life, and I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. I could name a number of things that people in my life are going through right now that are hard. Just give yourself some grace. Where do you need to love yourself today? So I'm going to close with a story. There's a rich and beautiful kingdom that stretched beyond the horizon. But the prince who lived there was very unhappy because he had warts all over his face. And people were very unkind to him. They would laugh at him. They would ridicule him. And his father was ashamed of him. So he would stay in his room, and he was very alone and miserable. And when his dad died, he was the king, so he declared, no one will ever ridicule me again, or they will be killed. But the truth was, he still stayed in his room, alone and ashamed. And when he did go out, he would put a bag over his head so no one could see his face. But after many years, he heard about a wise man who lived at the top of the mountain. So he puts his bag on, he climbs to the top of the mountain so the wise man could help him. And when he gets to the top, he takes his bag off. The wise man studies his face and says, you have warts on your face. And the king was enraged. He runs out of the building. He puts his bag back on his head and he tries to run quickly down the hill and he tumbles and he slides and he lands in the lake. And the wise man came down and pulled him out of the lake and took his bag off so he could breathe. And the horrified king said, you're laughing at me. Not at all, said the wise man. Looking down, the king said, the boys in the village laughed at me and my father was ashamed of me. The wise man said, I'm not those boys, and I'm not your father. That must have been really hard for you. The king said, yes, it was, with tears in his eyes. And you can see I'm not laughing at you, and I'm not ashamed of you, said the wise man. The king began to feel differently. He looked into the lake, and he saw his reflection, and he said, I really do have a lot of warts. I know, the wise man agreed. And don't you find them disgusting? Said the king. The wise man said, no, and I don't find mine disgusting anymore. For the first time, the king looked at the wise man and saw that he also had warts on his face. Why do you not wear a bag over your head? The old man replied, I used to, but I couldn't see. And I was lonely, so I took it off. Didn't people laugh at you? Yeah, some people laughed at me, but gradually I found people who didn't laugh at me. The king was thrilled. He said, I don't think I'm going to wear my bag anymore when you're around. Will I find other people who won't think I'm disgusting? Of course you will. And with the love of those people, you're not going to care when other people laugh. The king dropped the bag on the ground and went back to his kingdom, which was far more beautiful without a bag over his head. And he did find people who didn't mind his warts at all. And for the first time in his life, he was very happy. So where do you need to take the bag off of your head? It's really the first step on the path to real love. Examine where you're at. Where do you need to beef up your foundation in your life and rebuild it? Where are you doing the getting, the protecting? Just build your awareness so you know where your work is, right? It's not bad. You're not wrong because you have work. And take it into spiritual practice. Get support, get prayer, and just trust that that spirit, which is the angel by your side, that is going to guide you, it's going to direct you, and that is going to bring you to this path of real love. Let's take that into prayer. So we all take a deep breath together. And in this moment, I just know the presence of Spirit, this infinite, eternal, loving grace of Spirit that always and everywhere is surrounding us. This source of goodness that is our life itself. And I know that I am one with this divine source of love and goodness and grace, just as I know that this is the truth for each and every person hearing my words, that we are all one with this loving presence and power, this grace, this goodness, this divine energy that is guiding and protecting us in all things. So from this place of oneness, I just declare that there is a transformation happening within each one of us, that our awareness of what real love is growing. I just know and claim for each of us that we take responsibility for giving it to ourselves. This loving energy, this essence, this life itself lives in you, and it is the truth of who you are. So I just know and claim a deeper realization of that for every one of us in this moment by the power of this word. And I just know as we transform within, whatever is around us transforms on the outside. I say yes to this infinite loving presence, this unconditional love for each and every one of us. I just know that Spirit is present right where you are. And I'm so grateful for this. I'm just so grateful for the inner transformation that is happening. I'm so grateful for this loving connection that unites us all. And I'm so grateful to know that Spirit is present, guiding and protecting each and every one of us. And with so much gratitude for all of this, I simply say, and so it is, amen.